Los Angeles was a city of shining lights, towering skyscrapers, and endless opportunities. But for Sophie Williams, it had become a world of silence and shadows. At just 12 years old, her life had been turned upside down by a car accident 2 years earlier, leaving her paralyzed from the waist down. Where there had once been laughter, running feet, and carefree days, there was now a chair that bound her and a loneliness that no amount of money could heal. Sophie often stared out her bedroom window, watching children her age play, wishing she could be one of them. Her mother, Victoria Williams, at 35, was one of the most successful women in Los Angeles. A billionaire businesswoman with power and influence, she was always in the public eye on magazine covers, at board meetings, or in exclusive charity events. To the world, she was untouchable, a symbol of wealth and determination. But behind the high walls of her mansion, her daughter sat quietly in her wheelchair, forgotten in moments that mattered most. Victoria provided the best doctors, therapies, and technologies, but none of them had brought back Sophie's spirit. Sophie's wheelchair had become her only means of independence, yet it was constantly breaking down. Despite its sleek design and costly modifications, the chair was unreliable, much like the promises of specialists who said they could give her a better life. Each breakdown felt like another reminder that her world was limited, fragile, and out of her control. On a particularly warm afternoon, as she and her chauffeur tried to make their way home, the chair snapped. The wheel twisted, the frame jerked, and suddenly she was stranded on the edge of a busy Los Angeles street. The chauffeur scrambled to call for assistance, but Sophie sat quietly, gripping the handles of her chair, feeling the familiar frustration build inside her. Cars passed. People walked by, but no one stopped. She hated the looks of pity, the quick glances before people turned away. It made her feel invisible, like her broken chair was just another piece of clutter on the sidewalk. She wanted to scream, but instead she stayed silent, her heart heavy with the thought that once again she was at the mercy of others. It was then that Marcus Miller appeared, 28 years old, wearing oil-stained jeans and a simple grey t-shirt. He was stepping out of a small auto workshop. Across the street, Marcus wasn't the kind of man who drew attention in the glamorous city of Los Angeles. He didn't own flashy suits, didn't drive expensive cars, and didn't live in a penthouse. What he had was a kind soul, strong hands, and an instinct to help anyone in need. And when his eyes fell on Sophie, struggling in her broken chair, his feet moved before his mind even caught up. "Don't worry, I'll fix this," Marcus said as he knelt down beside the wheelchair. His voice was calm, steady, filled with a sincerity Sophie hadn't heard in years. She blinked at him, surprised that a stranger would care enough to stop. She studied him closely. The smudge of grease on his cheek, the worn look of his boots, the way his eyes carried warmth instead of pity. He wasn't rich, powerful, or important like the people her mother surrounded herself with. Yet in that moment, Sophie felt something stronger than any doctor's assurance. She felt seen. Marcus's hands worked quickly, with the practiced movements of someone who had spent years fixing broken things. He examined the bent frame, tightened the loose bolts, and pulled out a small set of tools he always carried in his workshop. As he worked, he asked Sophie gentle questions, not about her injury or her condition, but about her favorite hobbies, her favorite color, what kind of books she liked. She hesitated at first, unsure how to respond, but eventually whispered back, "Answers." For the first time in years, she was having a conversation that wasn't clinical or forced. Within an hour, the chair was not only fixed but improved. Marcus had adjusted the seat to better support Sophie's back and modified the wheels so they would move more smoothly. He even added a small cushion from his workshop, apologizing that it wasn't much, but thinking she might feel more comfortable. When Sophie placed her hands on the wheels and tested the chair, it glided forward effortlessly. Her eyes widened, her lips curved into a hesitant smile, and then without realizing it turned into real laughter. That sound startled even her, because she hadn't laughed like that since before the accident. The chauffeur looked on, astonished. He had seen countless experts come and go, each one failing to truly connect with Sophie. Yet here was a young mechanic, with no medical training, no prestigious background, and no wealth, managing to reach the little girl in a way no one else had. Marcus didn't charge her, didn't boast about what he had done, and didn't even ask for recognition. He simply stood, wiped his greasy hands on his jeans, and gave Sophie a smile that was as genuine as the repairs he had made. Victoria arrived moments later, stepping out of her sleek black car, her designer heels clicking against the pavement. Her eyes narrowed at first, suspicious of the stranger kneeling beside her daughter. But then she noticed Sophie's face bright, alive, glowing in a way she hadn't seen in years. She paused, her heart aching with a mix of guilt and wonder. She had spent millions on doctors and treatments, but none of them had given Sophie this look of joy. For the first time, Victoria felt powerless in front of a man who had nothing yet had given everything. Sophie turned toward her mother, her smile still lingering. "Mom, he fixed it," she said, with excitement, her voice carrying a hope Victoria thought she had lost forever. Marcus stepped back, lowering his eyes respectfully as Victoria approached. "Thank you," Victoria said softly, though the words felt inadequate compared to what she had just witnessed. Marcus shrugged, almost embarrassed. "It was nothing," he replied, but deep down, he knew it hadn't been nothing. He had given this little girl something priceless, a moment of freedom, a glimpse of joy, and the reminder that she wasn't broken, only her chair had been. As Sophie wheeled herself forward with newfound ease, Victoria watched in silence, her throat tightening. For all her power, all her wealth, she couldn't buy the look she was seeing on her daughter's face. Marcus had managed to do what no one else could. He had restored a piece of her spirit. Sophie, still smiling, looked back at Marcus and whispered, "Thank you." In that single moment, something shifted. A connection was formed between the billionaire's daughter, the overworked mechanic, and the mother who had almost forgotten what truly mattered. And none of their lives would ever be the same again. Over the next few weeks, Marcus became more than just the man who had fixed Sophie's broken wheelchair. He quickly turned into a friend, someone who saw her not through the lens of disability, but as a bright young girl with dreams and potential. He invited her back to his workshop, a modest place filled with the smell of oil, the clinking of tools, and the hum of machines. For Sophie, it became a haven far different from the cold, sterile doctor's offices she was used to. The workshop felt alive, and so for the first time in years did she. At first, Sophie was hesitant. She had grown used to people staring at her, whispering about her condition, or offering sympathy she didn't want. But Marcus never did any of those things. He talked to her as if she were his equal, as if her wheelchair was just another part of her, not the whole of her. When he showed her how to strengthen her arms with small exercises, he didn't frame it as therapy. Instead, he presented it as training, like she was an athlete preparing for something bigger. That subtle difference gave Sophie courage. Each afternoon she visited, Marcus taught her small techniques, how to maneuver her chair more efficiently, how to shift her weight to make turns easier, how to use her strength to overcome small obstacles. They practiced inside the garage, racing around stacks of tires, dodging toolboxes, and sometimes laughing so hard that Marcus's co-workers stopped just to smile. Sophie's laughter was infectious, and it filled the workshop with a light it hadn't seen in years. Marcus knew that sound mattered more than any repair he could make. Victoria often sat in her sleek black car outside the workshop, watching from a distance. She struggled to understand how this mechanic, with no medical degree, no advanced equipment and no wealth, had managed to reach her daughter in ways specialists couldn't. Her daughter, who, Once avoided mirrors and conversation now laughed freely. Sophie's cheeks flushed with color again, her eyes sparkled with life, and her confidence seemed to grow with every visit. Victoria, the woman who thought money could solve everything, found herself questioning everything she had believed. One particular afternoon, as the sun set over Los Angeles, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Victoria finally stepped out of her car. She walked toward the workshop, her designer heels clicking softly against the pavement. Sophie was inside, laughing uncontrollably as Marcus pretended to lose a wheelchair race, spinning in circles as if defeated. The sight stopped Victoria in her tracks. Her daughter's laughter was pure, untouched by pain or fear, and for the first time in years, Victoria realized she had almost forgotten what that sounded like. When Marcus finally noticed her presence, he quickly set down the tool he was holding, wiping his greasy hands on a rag. Victoria, dressed in elegance, looked so out of place among the steel and grease. But her eyes weren't filled with judgment. They were filled with questions. She glanced at Sophie, then at Marcus, and finally asked, "What did you do to her that doctors couldn't?" Her voice trembled, slightly betraying her calm exterior. It wasn't an accusation. It was genuine confusion, laced with a touch of desperation. Marcus looked at Sophie before answering, his gaze softening as he watched her. She was practicing with the wheels, maneuvering with determination, her face glowing with pride. He then turned back to Victoria and replied simply, "I just saw her, not the wheelchair." The words hung in the air, cutting through the silence like a blade. For Marcus, it was nothing more than the truth, but for Victoria, those words struck deep. She realized how much she had failed to see, blinded by her own pursuit of solutions that money could buy. Victoria had spent countless nights signing checks, consulting world-renowned doctors, and buying the most advanced equipment, all while missing the most important thing, being there for Sophie, seeing her as more than her condition. Marcus's words pierced through the armor of her wealth and power, leaving her standing in the middle of a workshop with tears welling in her eyes. For the first time, she felt powerless in the presence of someone who owned nothing compared to her, yet gave her daughter everything she truly needed. Over time, Victoria began to visit the workshop more often, though at first she kept her distance. She watched how Marcus interacted with Sophie, never pitying her, never treating her as fragile, but always pushing her to believe in herself. He gave Sophie challenges, encouraged her victories, and laughed alongside her failures. Slowly, Victoria began to see her daughter in a new light. Sophie wasn't broken. She wasn't defined by her wheelchair. She was strong, resilient, and filled with a fire that had only needed someone to notice. One evening, Sophie showed Victoria a small sketch she had made while sitting in the workshop. It was a design for a wheelchair, sleeker, lighter, and painted with bright colors. "Marcus said I could make this real one day," Sophie said with pride. Victoria's eyes widened, stunned by the ambition she heard in her daughter's voice. For years, Sophie had lived without dreams, content only to exist. Now, she was daring to create, to imagine, to believe in possibilities again. Victoria silently thanked Marcus, though words never seemed enough. The bond between Sophie and Marcus grew stronger with every passing day. To Sophie, he wasn't just a mechanic. He was a mentor, a friend, a source of hope. He believed in her when no one else had. To Marcus, Sophie wasn't just a girl in a wheelchair. She was a fighter, someone who had endured so much yet still carried the potential to shine. The two of them built a world inside that small garage, a world where Sophie wasn't defined by limitations, and where laughter echoed louder than pain. Victoria eventually approached Marcus again, this time not as a billionaire addressing a stranger, but as a mother speaking to a man who had saved her daughter's spirit. "I don't know how to thank you," she admitted, her voice softer than Sophie had ever heard it. Marcus shrugged, his hands resting casually on the workbench. "You don't need to. Just keep seeing her the way she deserves to be." Seen. Those words settled into Victoria's heart like a promise, reshaping the way she viewed both her daughter and herself. As weeks passed, Sophie's confidence continued to grow. She no longer avoided crowds. Instead, she began talking about school, about friends, even about her dreams of building things one day. She spoke about designing chairs, cars, even inventions that could make life easier for people like her. Victoria listened in awe, realizing that the girl she thought she had lost was still there, buried under layers of sorrow that Marcus had helped peel away. For the first time in years, their home was filled with laughter again. At night, Victoria would sit by Sophie's bedside, remembering the little girl who once ran down hallways with boundless energy. She realized that while she could never change the accident, she could change the way she supported her daughter moving forward. She didn't need to spend millions to give Sophie happiness. She only needed to be present. And in the quiet of those nights, Victoria finally understood what Marcus had meant. Sophie didn't need someone to fix her. She needed someone to truly see her. The mechanic's influence reached far beyond the workshop. Sophie's teachers began noticing her improved confidence, her willingness to participate more in class. Even her therapists noticed progress, not because of new methods, but because Sophie now believed she was capable of progress. Hope had returned to her life, and it showed in every smile, every laugh, every word she spoke. And while Victoria knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, she no longer feared it, because Sophie wasn't facing it alone anymore. For Marcus, nothing changed in his life financially. He still worked long hours, fixing cars and machines, barely making ends meet. But his heart was fuller than it had ever been. Each time Sophie wheeled into his shop, he felt a sense of purpose that money couldn't buy. He didn't need recognition or rewards. Sophie's laughter was enough, and deep down he knew that this journey was just beginning for Sophie, for Victoria, and maybe even for himself. Weeks later, the grand ballroom in downtown Los Angeles shimmered with golden light. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above, and violins played softly as guests in elegant gowns and sharp tuxedos gathered for a charity event. The air was filled with chatter, laughter, and the clinking of glasses. It was an evening meant to celebrate generosity, but no one could have guessed that the night's most powerful moment would not come from speeches or donations. It would come from a 12-year-old girl who had once been hidden in the shadows of pain and despair. Sophie arrived with her mother, rolling confidently into the hall. Her posture was upright, her head high, and her eyes glowed with a life that hadn't been there for years. People turned, whispering in surprise. Some remembered her as the withdrawn child who rarely left her mother's side, quiet and distant. Now she moved through the room with warmth, greeting strangers with a smile that carried both innocence and strength. The sight of her was so unexpected that conversations halted, and the energy of the room shifted around her. Victoria walked beside her, her designer gown trailing across the polished floor, but for the first time she didn't draw the attention Sophie did. Guests leaned down to speak with her, and Sophie answered with confidence, even showing them how smoothly she could maneuver her chair. A man in a navy suit clapped his hands in admiration when Sophie spun in a perfect circle, laughing at her own performance. It was as though the wheelchair was no longer a symbol of limitation, but a symbol of resilience, transformed by the spirit of the girl who commanded it. Near the back of the room, Marcus stood quietly, his simple suit in stark contrast to the luxury around him. He didn't care about appearances, he only wanted to be there, to support Sophie. Watching her shine, he felt a swell of pride that words could never capture. He remembered the first day he saw her frustrated, stuck, and hopeless as her wheelchair broke outside his shop. Now just weeks later, she radiated confidence, filling a room full of strangers with admiration. It was nothing short of miraculous. Victoria found Marcus in the crowd, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. She moved closer, standing beside him as they both watched Sophie interact with the guests. Her voice broke as she whispered, "You didn't just fix her wheelchair, you fixed my daughter's spirit." For a woman who had built her empire on control, power, and wealth, admitting those words was not easy. Yet in that moment, she wasn't the billionaire everyone admired. She was simply a mother, grateful to the man who had given her child back to her. Marcus glanced at her, uncomfortable with praise but deeply moved. "She did that herself," he replied softly. "All she needed was someone to believe in her again." His gaze returned to Sophie, who was now laughing with an elderly couple, her joy infectious. To Marcus, it was never about heroism or recognition. He had only done what felt natural, treating Sophie as more than her chair, more than her condition. But seeing the impact of that choice now, in this glittering ballroom, he realized just how powerful simple kindness could be. As the evening progressed, Sophie became the quiet star of the event. People who had come expecting to discuss business deals or make appearances for publicity instead found themselves drawn to her. Her laughter carried across the hall, a sound so pure it silenced the noise of wealth and status. She shared small stories about Marcus's garage, describing it as her favorite place in the city. The guests were charmed, not by her mother's billions, but by Sophie's spirit. They saw a young girl who had chosen joy over despair, courage over fear. Victoria stood nearby, her heart swelling with emotions she hadn't felt in years. She realized that all the money in the world couldn't buy the transformation she was witnessing. Doctors had treated Sophie's body, specialists had offered theories, but none had reached her soul. Marcus had done that without titles, without wealth, without expectation. He had given Sophie what Victoria had failed to give: time, patience, and unconditional belief. And in doing so, he had reminded Victoria of her own humanity, buried for so long beneath boardrooms and contracts. Later that night, a guest approached Victoria and praised Sophie's remarkable progress. "You must be so proud," the woman said warmly. Victoria smiled, tears threatening again. "I am," she whispered. But deep inside, she knew that her pride was mixed with humility. She was proud of Sophie for her strength, proud of Marcus for his kindness, and humbled by the lesson she herself had learned. True wealth, she realized, was not in money or power. It was in the love and resilience that connected human hearts. Toward the end of the evening, when the speeches began, Sophie was invited to the stage. The audience erupted in applause as she wheeled forward, her small hands steady on the rims. She paused, looked out over the glittering crowd, and smiled. "For a long time I thought my chair meant I couldn't do much," she began softly, her voice carrying more power than expected. "But someone taught me that it is not the chair that defines me. It's my courage, my choices, and my dreams." The room fell silent, every guest hanging on her words. Marcus stood frozen, his chest tight with emotion. He hadn't known Sophie would speak, but hearing her echo the words he once told her, "Your chair doesn't define you," brought tears to his eyes. She continued, "I want to thank my mom for always trying to help me, and I want to thank Marcus for reminding me that I'm more than what people see." Applause thundered through the hall, echoing against the chandeliers. Sophie's words didn't just touch her mother or Marcus. They touched everyone present, reminding them of the strength found in kindness and hope. After the event, Sophie returned to Marcus and Victoria, her face glowing with pride. "Did I do okay?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly with vulnerability. Marcus crouched down beside her, smiling warmly. "You didn't just do okay, you changed hearts tonight." Victoria knelt too, embracing her daughter tightly. For years, she had feared losing Sophie to despair. But tonight she realized she had gained her back stronger than ever. In that embrace, all the barriers of wealth and status dissolved, leaving only a mother and daughter bound by love. From that night onward, Marcus became more than a mechanic to them. He became part of their lives. He joined family dinners, helped Sophie with her creative wheelchair designs, and even teased Victoria when she tried to step into the garage in heels. What once began as an accidental meeting by a broken wheelchair turned into something far greater, a bond built on humanity. They weren't bound by money or status or need, but by love, respect, and gratitude. In Marcus, they found not just a friend, but family. Victoria's world also began to change. Her priorities shifted from endless boardroom meetings to afternoons spent with Sophie, sketching, laughing, and living. She realized that success wasn't in the contract she signed, but in the memories she made with her daughter. Marcus's presence reminded her daily that life's true riches were simple kindness, time, compassion, and love. The once lonely mansion became a home filled with laughter, warmth, and the sound of wheels rolling across polished floors, no longer a symbol of sadness, but of strength. For Sophie, the future looked brighter than ever. With Marcus's guidance and her mother's support, she began working on designs for a new type of wheelchair, one that could empower kids like her to feel confident and independent. She dreamed of sharing her ideas with the world one day, proving that her accident hadn't broken her, it had given her purpose. And with every sketch she made, every laugh she shared, she carried the memory of the moment Marcus first told her, "It's your courage that defines you." The night of the charity gala became a turning point, not just for Sophie, but for everyone who had witnessed it. Guests left the ballroom with more than memories of chandeliers and fine wine. They carried with them a story of resilience and compassion. Whispers of Sophie's speech spread throughout the city, inspiring others to look beyond appearances, to see people for who they truly were. And for Marcus, it was enough to know that one act of kindness had rippled out to touch so many lives, far beyond what he could have imagined. In the end, it wasn't the wheelchair that had changed Sophie's life, nor the billions her mother possessed. It was the mechanic who had stopped to help, who chose to see her as a person rather than a problem. It was the mother who rediscovered her daughter by opening her own heart. And it was Sophie herself whose courage to laugh again lit up every room she entered. Together, they proved that true wealth is not measured in dollars, but in love, kindness, and the hope that keeps humanity alive.